I never thought moving into my quiet lakeside cabin would mean fighting over something as ridiculous as Wi-Fi. But then again, I hadn't met Karen yet. You know the type, sharp red blazer sunglasses, even on cloudy days, clipboard clutched like it's the Constitution. She's the self-appointed queen of our HOA, convinced she controls not just the neighborhood, but apparently the very airwaves. One sunny afternoon, she stormed up to my porch, pointed at my router through the window, and demanded my password like it was a community resource. According to her, Wi-Fi falls under shared amenities. I swear she said that with a straight face. I laughed. She didn't. And that's when I realized Karen wasn't just nosy, she was dangerous. Because if I didn't hand over my signal, she was ready to make my life hell. And oh, she tried. But what she didn't know was that messing with my Wi-Fi meant I'd end up discovering every dirty secret she'd been hiding. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Drop it in the comments below. Life at the cabin was supposed to be simple, peaceful, predictable in the best way. You wake up, make coffee strong enough to wake the dead, listen to the lake lap against the dock, and watch your cat Radar chase dust motes like he's on payroll. My Wi-Fi wasn't meant to be part of anyone's business, just a router humming away so I could check emails, stream a ball game, maybe download a movie when the nights got long. In other words, the bare essentials of modern civilization. But nothing draws trouble faster than peace, and trouble in my neighborhood wears a red blazer and carries a clipboard. Karen. I heard her before. I saw her sharp heels snapping against the gravel path like the percussion section of a marching band. Radar, who usually reserves his disdain for squirrels, actually sat up and flicked his tail like he'd spotted prey. By the time she appeared at the bottom of my porch steps, the air itself had braced. She had that way about her, like she wasn't walking into a conversation but into a courtroom where she was prosecutor, judge, and jury rolled into one. "Good afternoon, Mr. Lawson," she said, enunciating each syllable like she was announcing me at a disciplinary hearing. "Karen," I answered, not moving from my rocking chair. "I figured it was best to meet fire with serenity. I'm here regarding your Wi-Fi. Now let me stop and emphasize something. No sane adult in the history of cabins has ever marched across a neighbor's yard demanding access to their internet. But sanity has never been Karen's strong suit. My Wi-Fi," I repeated. "What about it? You need me to rename it? I've been thinking of going with Pretty Fly for a Wi-Fi." Her lips pinched as if even jokes were violations. "You are in possession of a private network that is not registered with the HOA. According to Clause 12, Section 7, all personal infrastructure must be compatible with shared amenities." She tapped her clipboard, which I swear was more weapon than tool. "Therefore, you are required to provide your password for inspection and redistribution." I stared at her. Inspection and redistribution, yes. The shared HOA network has been overloaded during peak hours. Several families have complained. Students, elderly residents, and volunteers for our community watch require bandwidth for essential services. Your private router is contributing to signal congestion. If you share your access, everyone benefits. I sipped my coffee slowly, mostly to hide my grin. "You're saying my little cabin router is single-handedly causing bandwidth bottlenecks for the entire neighborhood?" Her jaw tightened. "Your selfishness is exacerbating the situation. This is a community, not a fortress. My router doesn't even reach past my dock," I said. "If your volunteers are trying to stream true crime dramas while spying on the cul-de-sac, that's not my problem." She ignored the jab. "As president of the Pine Hollow Lakeside Homeowners Association, I am authorized to impose daily fines for non-compliance. $50 per day escalating plus administrative fees." Administrative fees. For the paperwork. I leaned forward, set my mug on the porch railing, and gave her my most neighborly smile. "Karen, my Wi-Fi is not a public utility. It's not the post office. It's not a playground. It's a router in my living room. The only living creature with unrestricted access is my cat, and he mostly uses it to watch birds on YouTube." Radar meowed on cue, which I considered divine confirmation. Her eyes narrowed. "This attitude is unneighborly. Pine Hollow was built on principles of cooperation. What message do you send by hoarding connectivity?" "I'm sending the message that my password is mine," I said, standing now. At middle age, one learns the art of standing not as a threat, but as punctuation. If you want better internet, call the provider. Upgrade the HOA plan. Or radical idea, buy your own router. She scribbled on her clipboard. The scratching of her pen sounded like knives. "Then you leave me no choice. Expect penalties. Notices will be posted. Go ahead. But if you put a placard on my mailbox that says, 'Bandwidth Hoarder,' I'm keeping it. Could make a nice conversation starter." Her nostrils flared. She turned on her heel blazer, flapping like a cape, and stomped back down the path. Radar followed her with the slow disdain only cats can manage, as if escorting an unwelcome guest off the premises. I thought that was the end of it. A skirmish, nothing more. But then my phone buzzed. A notification from the HOA app. Important alert: bandwidth hoarding threatens community safety. No names attached, but the subtext glowed in neon me. A second buzz, a text from my neighbor Tasha. Everything okay? Saw Karen leaving your porch, looking like she swallowed a lemon whole. She wants my Wi-Fi password, I typed back. Oh no, she wrote. Last month she tried to ban wind chimes for noise pollution. You're next on her crusade list. I pocketed the phone and stared out at the water. The lake was calm, sky painted in soft brushstrokes of late afternoon light. It should have been tranquil. But tranquility doesn't survive long in the orbit of people like Karen. She didn't want peace. She wanted power. And she wasn't about to stop just because I'd said no. Later that evening, I walked down to my dock trying to shake it off. The boards creaked the same way. They always had, carrying the weight of generations. My grandfather built this place, my father patched the roof, and now it was mine. Standing there, I thought about boundaries, the invisible lines that protect what's ours. Some people respect them. Others barge across with clipboards and self-importance. I told myself she'd tire out eventually. Maybe she'd move on to measuring mailbox heights or campaigning against seasonal wreaths. But as the crickets started, their chorus and radar curled beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling this wasn't over. Because Karen wasn't just after a password, she was after control. And control in her world was everything. And if she thought I'd roll over, well, she was about to find out what happens when you try to hack the wrong guy. If Karen had stomped away from my porch with a bruised ego and nothing more, life might have returned to normal. I might have enjoyed my lake mornings in peace, coffee in hand, radar, sunbathing on the dock, maybe even a few friendly waves from the neighbors. But no, Karen didn't operate on retreat. She operated on escalation. The first sign came 2 days later, fluttering like some deranged form of origami against my cabin door flyers. Dozens of them stapled, taped, and wedged under rocks all over the neighborhood. The headline screamed in bold block letters: cabin owner blocks shared resources, neighborhood at risk. Underneath, my face stared back at me. Not a flattering photo either. Karen had clearly pulled it from an old HOA directory where I looked mid-sneeze. The caption beneath might as well have been a wanted poster. Refuses to cooperate with HOA connectivity guidelines. Hoards private bandwidth. Threatens community cohesion. I stood on my porch holding one of the flyers while radar pawed another, and for a brief second I wondered if this was real life or a satire skit. She had actually staged a smear campaign over Wi-Fi. Later that morning, walking into the general store down the road, I noticed whispers ripple like minnows as I passed. 2 neighbors ducked behind a magazine rack. One guy in line gave me a look usually reserved for tax collectors. Another old Mr. Grant just laughed, shook his head, and muttered, "She's lost it." I grabbed a carton of milk and pretended not to notice, but the truth gnawed. Rumors spread faster than wildfire in a dry pine forest, and Karen had just tossed a lit match into the underbrush. That night, a new notification pinged on the HOA app. Safety alert. Possible unauthorized use of bandwidth detected. My name wasn't written, but the timing was too perfect. Karen was playing this like chess, trying to box me into the villain corner until the whole neighborhood believed I was some sort of digital outlaw. Well, if it was chess she wanted, she'd picked the wrong opponent. You see, I wasn't just a guy with a cabin and a stubborn streak. Before retreating to this lakeside life, I'd worked as an IT consultant, cybersecurity firewalls, the kind of work that makes normal people's eyes glaze over. But it meant I knew more than the average Joe about network signals and exactly how vulnerable someone could be if they didn't understand digital locks. Karen had no idea, so I started paying closer attention. I checked my router logs one evening and saw something interesting: repeated failed login attempts at odd hours. 2, 3, sometimes 6 in a row, as if someone was typing random guesses into the password field hoping to strike gold. "Oh, Karen," I muttered, sipping my coffee. "You're not just bold, you're sloppy." To be sure, I set up a little trap. A decoy Wi-Fi name. Free HOA Wi-Fi. I left it unsecured, glowing like candy in a shop window. Within an hour, someone connected. Then disconnected. Then connected again. The device ID pinged across my system like a burglar tripping every alarm. I didn't need to guess whose laptop it was. It had Karen HP written in the metadata like a calling card. The audacity nearly made me laugh. She wasn't content with demanding my password. She was actively trying to hack her way in. But here's the kicker. By connecting to my decoy, she'd practically rolled out a red carpet into her own files. She thought she was sneaking into my fortress, but in reality, she'd walked straight into a hall of mirrors I controlled. Now, let me be clear, I wasn't aiming to play dirty. Not yet. My first instinct was self-preservation log. The attempts collect the evidence, maybe confront her with it if she pushed too far. But curiosity is a funny thing. And when someone spends days plastering your face on flyers and slandering you online, well, curiosity sharpens into something else. I dug deeper into the connection logs. Her browsing fingerprints were unmistakable shopping sites, recipe blogs, and ironically, forums about neighborhood unity. One evening I saw her attempt to access my printer remotely. My printer, as if she was going to commandeer it to churn out another batch of propaganda flyers. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just pettiness. It was obsession. And obsession has no brakes. Neighbors began approaching me cautiously. Hank, the guy who borrowed my ladder every spring, pulled me aside at the mailbox. "Look, I don't believe the stuff she's saying," he whispered like we were in a spy movie. "But, she told everyone you've been downloading questionable material." "Questionable?" I asked. "Yeah, like offshore gambling sites, illegal movies, even some conspiracy junk," I groaned. "Of course she did. She's convincing some of the older folks. You might want to clear the air at the next meeting." I thanked him, but inside I seethed. She wasn't just trying to shame me anymore. She was planting landmines in my reputation, hoping one would blow me out of the neighborhood entirely. Back at the cabin, I paced the porch radar, tailing me like a little orange shadow. My mind worked faster than my feet. Karen had escalated from demands to rumors to active hacking attempts. If she wanted war, she was going to get it, but not on her terms. I sat down at my desk, cracked my knuckles, and started writing scripts. Not the kind you're thinking of. The digital kind, small traps and trackers, breadcrumbs designed to follow her every keystroke once she tried to sneak back into free HOA Wi-Fi. I wasn't stealing. I wasn't even snooping, at least not yet. I was building a digital mirror, one that would reflect her actions back to me in exquisite detail. By midnight, my screen lit up with the first results, her laptop connected again and again. She poked, prodded, and stumbled around in the fake network like a raccoon in a trash can. Every move she made left a mark, and each mark led to something bigger. Hints of her email accounts, saved logins, a sloppy trail of digital breadcrumbs that pointed straight toward the secrets she never meant anyone to see. I leaned back in my chair, heart beating harder than I cared to admit, because in that moment one thought crystallized like ice water in my veins. She thought she was hacking me, but really I was already inside her world, and what I was about to find would make Wi-Fi passwords look like playground games. You know that feeling when someone underestimates you, when they take one look and assume you're harmless, clueless, maybe even weak? I could almost hear Karen's inner monologue every time she stormed onto my porch. This guy's a pushover. He'll cave, eventually. That's the thing about living in a lakeside cabin, sipping coffee, fixing your own roof. People assume you retired from the world, that you're just a quiet man who never owned more than a hammer and a fishing pole. They don't imagine that for 20 years you were the guy corporations paid big money to keep hackers out of their systems. They don't know that while you look like a middle-aged handyman, you once stared down breaches that could have cost millions. Karen had no idea. I spent the next few nights quietly setting up the digital equivalent of a hunting blind. My decoy network, free HOA Wi-Fi, was bait. Behind it, I built layered traps, honeypots, false directories files with enticing names like HOA, budgets, and community rules update, docx. Each one was rigged, designed to record her every move the moment she touched it. And touch it she did. By Friday evening, I had logs full of failed attempts, then successful entries. She clicked around like a nosy raccoon in a kitchen at midnight, knocking over pots she didn't understand. Every keystroke she made echoed back to me. It wasn't long before I had more than breadcrumbs. I had her digital fingerprints. Now, I'll admit, there was a part of me that considered shutting it down right there. I had proof she was trespassing in my digital yard. That would have been enough to embarrass her at the next HOA meeting, maybe scare her into retreat. But then I saw something that made me freeze. Her laptop wasn't just probing my decoys, it was syncing. Automatic backups kicked in, spilling metadata, cached logins, fragments of her email sessions. In layman's terms, it was like she'd left her diary unlocked on my porch while accusing me of hoarding notebooks. And what I glimpsed inside was jaw-dropping. First, there were her emails. Dozens of them flagged as official HOA communication. Except they weren't so official. She was double charging some residents for maintenance fees, funneling the excess into a private account. She'd been sending nasty, unsigned notices to neighbors she disliked, thinly veiled threats about lawn height, porch decorations, even the type of mailboxes they used, and then the pièce de résistance receipts. Expensive handbags, luxury spa weekends, even a pair of season tickets, all purchased with what she labeled in spreadsheets as HOA community outreach funds. I actually laughed out loud, startling Radar from his nap. "Karen, you maniac. You're embezzling from your own neighbors and screaming at me about Wi-Fi." Radar blinked at me, unimpressed, and went back to sleep. I leaned closer to the screen. The deeper I looked, the uglier it got. She'd manipulated votes during last year's HOA board election, changing the wording of ballots, losing the ones she didn't like. There were email chains where she bragged to a friend about how easily she could sway people by invoking safety and community spirit. Her exact words, "People are sheep. They'll follow if you scare them enough." That line alone had my blood boiling. This wasn't about Wi-Fi. It never had been. My password was just the excuse she needed to tighten her grip on the neighborhood. Control, that was the real currency for her. She didn't care about kids streaming homework or elderly folks using telemedicine. She cared about power, and she was willing to pocket cash, spread lies, and bully anyone who didn't kneel to her clipboard crown. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the monitor painting my cabin walls in blue light. A storm was brewing in my chest. Because here's the thing, once you see corruption, you can't unsee it. Once you know the truth, ignoring it feels like complicity. And me, I wasn't built to sit quietly while a bully fleeced good people. So I made a plan. Step 1, gather evidence. Screenshots of her spreadsheets, her emails, her fake maintenance invoices. I archived them neatly time-stamped and watermarked. Years in IT had taught me evidence means nothing if it can't hold up under scrutiny. I wanted every pixel ironclad. Step 2, trace the money. If she was pocketing HOA funds, the trail would be in her transactions. Sure enough, within hours, I mapped transfers from the official HOA account straight into her personal checking. From there, she spent with reckless abandon vacations, jewelry designer, clothes, all while preaching simplicity and shared responsibility at board meetings. Step 3, choose the battlefield. Karen loved public spectacle. She thrived on drama, on cornering people when she had an audience. Fine then. I'd beat her at her own game. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Monday evening. Everyone would be there, half to listen, half to watch the fireworks. That was where I'd drop the hammer. All weekend I prepped. Screenshots, organized files, encrypted evidence packaged in a neat little presentation that even the most tech-illiterate neighbor could understand. For good measure, I backed everything up to a secure drive and stashed it under a loose floorboard. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. Still, I wasn't just angry, I was conflicted. Because here's the truth, exposing someone is messy. It doesn't just end their game, it changes everything around them. People get hurt, trust gets shattered, and once it's out, you can't take it back. But then I remembered those flyers, my face plastered around like a criminal neighbor's, whispering kids pointing. Karen didn't care who she humiliated as long as she came out on top. Why should I spare her from the very medicine she prescribed for me? By Sunday night, I had my answer. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. I shut down my computer, poured myself a drink, and stepped onto the porch. The lake glimmered under a silver moon, calm and unknowing. Somewhere across the water, a loon called mournful and long. Radar curled at my feet, purring softly. Tomorrow, I whispered into the night, she gets what's coming. And as the wind stirred through the pines, it felt like even the trees were waiting for the showdown. Monday arrived, draped in the kind of summer humidity that makes the air feel like warm syrup. The lake sat still, mirror flat, almost too calm, as if nature itself was holding its breath. I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing folders on my laptop, Karen's secrets captured and cataloged. My finger hovered over the trackpad, and for the first time in years, I felt the old buzz of adrenaline, the rush I used to get when a high-stakes job landed on my desk back in my IT days. Except this wasn't some faceless hacker group or shady corporation. This was my neighbor. And that made it worse, because neighbors are supposed to be the people you wave to when you check the mail, the ones you lend a ladder, to the ones who shovel your drive when you're sick. Neighbors aren't supposed to be embezzling funds, sending fake fines and hacking into Wi-Fi networks like a budget Bond villain. I opened the first set of files again. Her emails scrolled across the screen, smug little manifestos typed out in perfect grammar, littered with condescension. We must present ourselves as guardians of the community. Fear motivates compliance, far better than friendliness. The Petersons are behind on dues again. If I issue another fine, they'll cave. People like that always cave. Then the spreadsheet's neat columns of maintenance and repairs, except the totals didn't add up. A $2.500 landscaping fee that led directly to a boutique florist in the city. A $1.200 safety inspection wired straight to a spa. And countless smaller transactions siphoned off in dribs and drabs that added up to thousands. And the pièce de résistance, her streaming history. Oh, the irony. Hours of Netflix binges and pay-per-view specials charged to the very account she used to tell others that streaming clogs community bandwidth. The hypocrisy dripped off the screen like grease from a cheap diner burger. I leaned back in my chair laughing despite myself. Karen, you absolute clown. Radar jumped into my lap, stretching across the keyboard as if he too wanted to scroll through the juicy gossip. I scratched behind his ears. What do you think? Should we keep this a secret, or should we give the people what they deserve? He purred louder, which I took as a vote for disclosure. Still, I wrestled with the weight of it. There's a thin line between justice and vengeance, and I could feel myself towing it. Was I exposing her because she was corrupt, or because she embarrassed me? The flyers, the rumors, the whispers, it had all been personal. And yet, staring at those files, I knew this went beyond me. She wasn't just petty, she was dangerous. Every dime she stole was a betrayal of trust, every lie a knife in the back of the people she claimed to serve. By mid-afternoon, my plan crystallized. The HOA meeting tonight was the stage, and the neighbors were the audience. Karen would walk in expecting to crucify me, wagging her clipboard, maybe even waving new evidence she'd cooked up. And I'd be ready not with excuses or counter-arguments, but with her own words. Her own numbers. Her own corruption blown up for everyone to see. But to make it work, I had to be meticulous. Evidence is fragile. If it looks doctored, people doubt it. If it's messy, they dismiss it. I spent hours crafting a clean, bulletproof presentation, screenshots labeled and time-stamped, transaction trails mapped like a crime drama board, quotes from her emails displayed in bold, a neat little slideshow titled, "The Truth About Our HOA President." As I worked, I imagined the room, the gasps, the disbelief. The moment the mask slipped off her face, I paused, then staring at the screen, a thought gnawing at me. Once I unleashed this, there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. Karen's reputation would implode. People would talk about it for years. Kids would whisper, "That's the lady who stole from us every time she passed." Could I live with being the guy who lit that match? But then I remembered Mr. Peterson, the old man on a fixed income who paid fines he couldn't afford because Karen had miscalculated his dues. I remembered Tasha rolling her eyes at Karen's endless rules, too tired to fight back because she had kids and a job. I remembered my own face on those flyers, branded a criminal for daring to keep a password private. Number. I wouldn't feel guilty. Karen had built her empire on lies. I was just pulling back the curtain. By early evening, everything was ready. I loaded the slideshow onto a flash drive, slipped it into my pocket, and took a deep breath. Radar meowed like he sensed the storm about to break. The sun was sinking as I walked down the road toward the community hall, my sneakers crunching on gravel. The neighborhood buzzed with small talk, people carrying folding chairs, kids chasing each other in the fading light. Everyone looked relaxed, oblivious to the grenade I carried in my pocket. I passed Hank, who gave me a sympathetic nod. "Brace yourself," he whispered. "Always," I said. Inside the hall smelled of lemonade and floor polish. A long table stood at the front where the board usually sat. Karen was already there, queen of the castle, clipboard resting like a scepter, lips curled in a satisfied smirk. She spotted me and straightened her blazer as if preparing for battle. "Mr. Lawson," she said loudly, projecting her voice to the crowd. "Glad you could make it. Tonight we'll be addressing your, how shall I put it, unneighborly activities." I didn't answer. Not yet. Timing was everything. Neighbors shuffled into their seats. Some glanced at me with suspicion, others with curiosity. Karen tapped her clipboard, clearing her throat for the performance she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "our community thrives on unity and fairness. Unfortunately, one resident has chosen selfishness over solidarity." Her words washed over me, but I wasn't listening. My hand rested lightly on the flash drive and my pocket pulsed steady. The evidence was there waiting. Soon, everyone in this room would know the truth. And Karen's reign of terror, her rules, her lies, her smug little smirks would finally collapse under the weight of her own hypocrisy. The community hall buzzed with the restless energy of a crowd that sensed blood. Folding chairs squeaked across the linoleum as neighbors settled in, fanning themselves with programs, paper plates, or whatever they could find in the sweltering late summer heat. The ceiling fans above churned lazily, doing little more than circulate the collective anticipation. Karen sat at the front table, her throne disguised as a metal folding chair. Red blazer, button-tight clipboard resting like a gavel, she radiated confidence. You could tell she had rehearsed this moment, practicing in front of her mirror with that smug little smile she wore whenever she thought she'd cornered someone. Tonight, in her mind, she wasn't just HOA president, she was judge, jury, and executioner. I slipped into a seat toward the middle flash drive, burning a hole in my pocket. My slideshow, The Truth About Our HOA President, waited patiently, like a lion behind a thin curtain. Karen tapped the microphone stand. Order, please. We'll begin tonight's session with an urgent matter concerning community safety and fairness. Her voice carried the tone of someone announcing a national emergency, not a neighborhood meeting. She flicked her gaze toward me, savoring the setup. It has come to my attention that one resident has flagrantly disregarded community guidelines. Mr. Lawson, she paused for emphasis, letting my name hang heavy in the air, has chosen to hoard his private Wi-Fi, refusing to share access, thereby endangering the cohesion of Pine Hollow. A ripple ran through the room. A few gasps, a couple of nods, some skeptical chuckles. Karen continued building momentum. Despite repeated requests, he has denied inspection. He has ignored the covenant. And his selfish behavior undermines the very spirit of this neighborhood. I propose fines be levied immediately, $50 per day, retroactive to last week. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some neighbors exchanged uneasy looks. Others glanced at me, waiting to see if I'd fold under pressure. Karen leaned forward, eyes gleaming, ready to pounce. That's when I stood. Actually, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational, before we vote on anything, maybe the neighborhood deserves to see the full picture. Karen's smile faltered. Sit down, Mr. Lawson. You'll have your chance after official business. No, I cut in louder now. This is official business, because what's really endangering Pine Hollow isn't my router. I pulled the flash drive from my pocket and held it up. It's her. The room erupted in whispers. Karen shot to her feet, face flushing crimson. This is inappropriate. Out of order, I ignored her, walked to the projector, and slid the drive into the port. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold glow across the room. Slide 1, the title page. The Truth About Our HOA President. Gasps. Chairs creaked as people leaned forward. Let's start simple, I said, clicking to the next slide. An email appeared in bold, Karen's name in the header. Fear motivates compliance, far better than friendliness. A collective intake of breath. I advanced again, another email. The Petersons are behind on dues again. If I issue another fine, they'll cave. People like that always cave. Old Mr. Peterson, sitting near the back, muttered a curse under his breath. His wife's eyes brimmed with tears. Karen lunged toward me. This is fabricated lies. Funny, I said, clicking again, because the metadata shows it came from your official HOA account. Time-stamped, archived, and the next slide appeared displaying bank records. It lines up perfectly with these transactions. Numbers filled the screen, HOA funds flowing neatly into Karen's personal account, then out again toward boutique florists, spas, designer stores. Each transfer documented, highlighted, undeniable. The hall erupted. People shouted, pointed, demanded explanations. Karen's face drained of color, then flushed an even deeper red. This is an invasion of privacy. He hacked me. Wrong, I said evenly. You hacked me. My router logs prove repeated intrusion attempts from your laptop. You tried to break into my system, and in doing so, you left a trail that led straight back to your dirty laundry. Someone from the crowd yelled, "Is this true?" Another shouted, "You stole from us." Karen stammered words, tripping over themselves. No, you don't understand. It was administrative necessity. Allocated funds, miscommunication. But I wasn't finished. I clicked again. Up popped screenshots of her streaming history. Hours upon hours of Netflix, pay-per-view boxing matches, and even a couple of suspicious subscriptions. And while you were scolding the neighborhood about bandwidth abuse, I said this is what you were doing. On our dime. The laughter this time wasn't friendly. It was bitter, sharp, mocking. Neighbors who'd been fined for minor infractions, flower boxes, mailbox, paint, lawn length, were practically vibrating with rage. Karen's voice cracked. It's all taken out of context. I let the next slide do the talking, her own words again, in an email to a friend. People are sheep. They'll follow if you scare them enough. That was the nail in the coffin. The room exploded. Shouts of "Resign, thief. You're finished" rattled the walls. Karen tried to regain control, slamming her clipboard on the table, but the sound was drowned by outrage. I stood back, letting the chaos unfold. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk. I just watched the truth burn away the lies she'd built her throne upon. Finally, one of the board members, Marge, a sweet grandmotherly type who'd always baked cookies for the meetings, rose shakily. I move, we suspend. Karen effective immediately pending investigation. Cheers. Applause. Even a few stomps on the floor. The vote was unanimous. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She gathered her clipboard with trembling hands, muttering threats of lawsuits and slander, but nobody followed her. She stormed out of the hall, red blazer flashing like a warning flare, the echo of her heels drowned by the collective voices of neighbors finally free of her reign. I turned off the projector, the screen fading to black. The room buzzed with relief, disbelief, and laughter. People clapped me on the back, shook my hand, thanked me. For once, the community felt like a community again, not a fiefdom ruled by a clipboard tyrant. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, the crickets sang louder than the voices inside. The moon hung high, casting silver across the lake. Radar would be waiting at home, curled on my porch like a tiny orange sentinel. And for the first time in months, Pine Hollow breathed easy. Karen had tried to shame me with lies. Instead, her own truth had undone her. The morning after the meeting, Pine Hollow felt different, lighter somehow. For months, maybe years, Karen's shadow had loomed over every front porch and mailbox. She had convinced us all that she was untouchable, that her clipboard carried the weight of law. But once the truth spilled across that projector screen, the spell broke. I woke to the sound of laughter outside, a rare sound in this neighborhood when Karen was in charge. Two kids zipped past on bikes, their parents not yelling slow down out of fear of HOA speed fines. Radar sat on the windowsill, tail twitching, watching the world reclaim its freedom. Coffee in hand, I scrolled through the HOA app out of habit. The front page no longer bore Karen's announcements. Instead, a message from the interim board. Effective immediately, Karen Thompson has been suspended from all HOA duties pending a full audit. A special election will be scheduled. The comments section was on fire. Neighbors vented about fines they'd paid, decorations they'd been forced to remove, petty threats they'd endured. One wrote, "She made me repaint my fence 3 times in one summer." Another, "She told me wind chimes were environmental hazards." And the most damning of all, she threatened to evict us when we couldn't afford her bogus maintenance fee. Now I know where the money went. By noon, the community grapevine was overflowing. I couldn't go 5 steps without someone stopping me. Hank slapped me on the back so hard I nearly spilled my mug. "You knocked her flat, buddy." About time someone stood up. Tasha hugged me, her kids tugging at her sleeve, whispering, "Is Karen going to jail?" I told them the truth, maybe. The evidence was now in the board's hands. They'd already contacted a lawyer, and if the numbers added up, and they did, Karen wasn't just losing her title. She was facing real consequences. But the part that stuck with me wasn't the anger. It was the relief. People were smiling. Neighbors who'd barely spoken before were swapping stories, trading baked goods, offering to help each other with chores. It was as if Karen's downfall had unclogged the arteries of the neighborhood. Still, I knew better than to assume the battle was over. People like Karen don't vanish quietly. And sure enough, 2 days later she tried. I spotted her from my porch marching up the road, blazer swapped for a gray pantsuit, face tight as stretched canvas. A few neighbors muttered, others folded their arms. She ignored them, storming toward me like I was the last fortress standing. "You think you've won," she hissed, not even bothering with pleasantries. "But this isn't over." I leaned against my porch railing, calm as a stone. "Karen, you stole from people. You lied. You bullied. And you got caught. It's over." Her eyes burned. "You hacked me. You hacked yourself," I said evenly. "All I did was watch." She jabbed a finger at me. "I'll sue. I'll drag you through court until you're bankrupt." "Go ahead," I replied. "But you might want to save your money for the HOA's lawyers. They're coming for you too." She flinched just barely, but enough to see the crack in her armor. For a long moment we stood in silence, the lake behind us glimmering in the sun, the world moving on around her. Finally, she spun on her heel and stormed away, her heels clacking like the last defiant notes of a dying march. That was the last time I saw her in power. Over the next week, the dominoes fell fast. The board's audit confirmed everything: embezzlement, fraudulent fines, unauthorized purchases, checks she'd written to herself under the guise of community services, even an emergency landscaping payment that turned out to be for her nephew's new car. Neighbors who once cowered at her clipboard now lined up to testify. Stories poured out like floodwater. She had banned porch swings, outlawed seasonal wreaths, and even threatened fines for excessive bird feeders. Each tale added another nail to the coffin of her credibility. The board voted unanimously to remove her permanently. A motion passed to reimburse residents wherever possible, though the money she'd siphoned away would take years to recover. And when the news reached the local paper, Karen's name hit the headlines. HOA president accused of embezzlement. Her empire was gone. And me, I sat back and watched it crumble. One evening, as the sun slid down behind the pines, Hank and a few others joined me on my porch. We drank cold beers, laughed about old grievances, and toasted to a new era for Pine Hollow. To free Wi-Fi, Hank joked, raising his bottle. I chuckled. Don't get any ideas. My password's still mine. But the truth was, it wasn't about Wi-Fi anymore. It never had been. It was about control, about a woman who thought fear could bind a community together. And when her fear tactics collapsed, what remained was stronger people choosing to look out for each other, not because a clipboard told them to, but because they wanted to. Later that night, I sat alone on the dock, radar curled beside me. The lake shimmered with moonlight crickets humming in chorus. I thought about how close Karen had come to breaking me, how she'd plastered my face on flyers, turned neighbors against me, threatened to bleed me dry with fines. But in the end, her downfall was her own doing. She had built her house of cards on lies, and the moment someone peeked inside, the whole thing toppled. I sipped my beer, breathed the cool night air, and smiled. Funny thing about Wi-Fi, it's invisible, intangible, yet powerful. Just like truth. You can't see it, but when it's out there, it connects everything, and no amount of blazers or clipboards can stop it. The dust in Pine Hollow didn't settle overnight, but once it did, the air felt fresher than it had in years. Without Karen's clipboard patrolling every mailbox, and lawn gnome people began to breathe again. It was remarkable how quickly the neighborhood transformed. You don't realize how much tension you've been carrying until it's gone. The first weekend after Karen's removal, the change was undeniable. Kids set up lemonade stands at the corner without worrying about vendor permits. Hank finally hung the wind chimes his wife had been hiding in the garage for 2 years. Tasha threw a backyard barbecue, and for the first time in memory, nobody whispered about whether paper plates were a violation of waste standards. People laughed freely like the place had been unclenched. I walked through the neighborhood and was greeted not with suspicion but gratitude. Folks waved, stopped me to chat, even invited me to their porches. It was like being part of a real community, not some mini dictatorship. Every thank you they offered felt less like praise for me and more like relief that we'd all escaped something toxic. Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled to rebuild. Marge, the grandmotherly baker, stepped in as interim president. She was no tech genius, but she had something better: kindness. She held open forums, encouraged suggestions, and radical idea actually listened. Instead of threats of fines, the HOA began sending out newsletters full of tips, resources, and even jokes. For the first time, the acronym HOA didn't make people grind their teeth. As for Karen, the fallout was swift and merciless. The audit revealed years of mismanagement, thousands of dollars misused. She tried to defend herself, of course, claimed clerical errors, misunderstood expenses, even community morale initiatives. But receipts don't lie. Neither do email timestamps. When the board handed their findings to the county authorities, Karen's fate was sealed. Rumor had it she faced charges for fraud and embezzlement. Neighbors spotted her once or twice after that, slinking into her house in plain clothes, no blazer, no clipboard. The transformation was almost eerie, the self-proclaimed queen of Pine Hollow reduced to a silent figure behind drawn curtains. Her reign ended not with a bang, but with the quiet collapse of her credibility. For me, the strangest part was adjusting to the calm. After weeks of drama, flyers, rumors, hacking, late-night digital warfare, the silence almost felt unnatural. One evening I sat on my porch with radar curled on my lap, staring out at the lake. The water was calm, the sky bruised purple with sunset, and I realized for the first time in a long time I wasn't waiting for trouble. But peace doesn't come free. It comes after standing firm, after saying no when it would have been easier to give in, after exposing lies when they threatened to strangle the truth. I thought back to the moment Karen first demanded my password, standing on my porch with all her false authority. If I'd given in, if I'd shrugged and handed it over just to keep the peace, none of this would have changed. She would have kept growing unchecked until there was nothing left of this community but fear and resentment. That thought struck me hard. Sometimes the smallest stand, one password, one boundary, becomes the crack that topples a wall of lies. Of course, neighbors asked me if I planned to run for HOA president now that Karen was gone. I laughed. I came here to get away from meetings, not run them. I told them I was more useful in the background, making sure the new board's systems were secure, helping them set up transparent accounting. I didn't want power. I wanted peace. And peace for once seemed possible. By late fall, the neighborhood had reinvented itself. Potlucks bloomed. Kids played soccer on lawns without someone measuring blade lengths. Even the holiday season felt different. People decorated boldly, lights, wreaths, inflatable Santas. The joy was contagious. Pine Hollow finally felt alive. One snowy evening, Marge stopped by with a tin of cookies. "You did more for us than you realize," she said, handing them over with a smile. "You reminded us that bullies only win when we let them. Thank you." I didn't know what to say. So I did what I always do when words fall short, poured coffee, sat her on the porch, and let the lake speak for us. Looking back, it's almost absurd. This whole saga started with a Wi-Fi password, a string of characters and visible waves in the air. But in truth, it was never about Wi-Fi. It was about power control and the courage to say no when someone tries to take what isn't theirs. Karen taught me something, though not in the way she intended. She showed me how toxic control corrodes, trust how lies fester in silence, and how fear can enslave a community. But she also reminded me of the flip side, that truth, when revealed, has a power all its own. Stronger than lies, stronger than fear. To anyone listening, I'll say this: stand firm. Whether it's a password, your peace, or your principles, guard them. Bullies thrive on submission, but they crumble when confronted with truth. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, sometimes it's messy, but silence lets them win. Our neighborhood is living proof. Once the lies were gone, people didn't just survive, they flourished. And so will you if you refuse to bow to the Karens of the world. So I'll leave you with this. What's your Wi-Fi password moment, the line you drew that changed everything? Share it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, stick around, because you never know when the next HOA saga will hit. Watch until the end always. You don't want to miss the twist.